The massive ship floated silently in the darkness of space, its hull covered in the scars of ancient battles. Marcus Reed pressed his hand against the viewport of his research vessel, his eyes wide with wonder as he watched the derelict vessel slowly rotate in the void. Behind him, the alien members of his archaeological team whispered among themselves, their voices filled with dismissal and mild amusement. "Another pile of space junk," said First Researcher Blue, his crystalline form shifting colors in what Marcus had learned was their species' equivalent of a laugh. "We should mark it for salvage and move on." Marcus shook his head, his weathered face reflecting off the transparent aluminum of the viewport. At 53, he had spent more than half his life studying ancient space civilizations, and something about this discovery felt different. "Look at the design," he said, pointing to the ship's unusual hull configuration. "Those aren't random patterns. They're purposeful." The ship's sensors had detected an entire field of similar vessels scattered across this uncharted sector. Initial scans suggested they were thousands of years old, yet their hull integrity remained remarkably intact. The vacuum of space had preserved them like insects in amber, waiting to tell their story. Second Researcher Green moved closer to the display terminal, her plant-like appendages waving as she analyzed the data. "The metal composition is primitive," she noted, her translator converting her musical language into standard English. "No quantum crystal matrices, no neural organic compounds, just basic alloys and simple computer systems." Marcus felt his frustration growing. "Simple doesn't mean ineffective," he argued, pulling up detailed scans on his tablet. "Look at these energy readings. Even after thousands of years, there's still residual power in some systems. Whatever civilization built these ships, they knew what they were doing." The ship's captain, a towering insectoid named Commander Red, chittered in amusement. "Dr. Reed, your enthusiasm is admirable, but we're looking for advanced civilizations. The Council isn't interested in studying primitive warfare vessels. They want quantum tech, dimensional drives, something that could advance our modern understanding." Marcus turned away from the viewport and faced his colleagues. 20 years of working with various alien species had taught him patience, but sometimes their prejudice against primitive technology tested his limits. "Request permission to leave a small team aboard," he said firmly. 2 hours, that's all I ask." Commander Red's antennae twitched in consideration. "Very well. But only because your species' tendency to obsess over lost causes is well documented. 2 hours, then we continue our survey of the sector." The boarding team consisted of Marcus, Second Researcher Green, and 2 security drones. Their shuttle carefully approached one of the smaller vessels, its searchlights illuminating the ancient hull. As they drew closer, Marcus could make out what looked like writing along the ship's side, barely visible under centuries of space dust. The airlock cycle was surprisingly smooth for such an old vessel. Their magnetic boots clunked against the deck as they entered the main corridor. Emergency lights, powered by some impossibly long-lasting energy source, cast a dim blue glow through the hallways. "Artificial gravity still functions," Green noted, surprise evident in her translator's tone. "Impossible for such an old system." Marcus moved forward, his hand scanner working to decode the writing on the walls. The symbols were familiar, teasing at the edges of his memory. They reached what appeared to be the bridge, and Marcus felt his heart skip a beat. The layout was different from modern ships, but somehow familiar. "This is," he muttered, wiping dust from a nearby console. His eyes widened as the symbols finally clicked into place. "This is English. An older form, but definitely English." Green's leaves rustled in confusion. "English, your species' language. Impossible. These ships are far too old." Marcus smiled as he continued cleaning the console, revealing more text. "Not impossible, just forgotten." He activated his comm link to the research vessel. "Commander, you're going to want to see this. We didn't just find any old fleet. We found humanity's first interstellar armada." The silence that followed was deafening. Humanity had barely been a spacefaring species for 3 centuries. The idea that they had built warships thousands of years ago was absurd. Yet here was the proof, preserved in the cold vacuum of space, waiting to be rediscovered. Marcus knew the council would laugh when they heard his report. Let them laugh. He had a feeling these ships had more stories to tell, and he intended to hear every one of them. 2 weeks had passed since the discovery of the ancient fleet. Marcus sat in his cramped office aboard the research station, surrounded by holographic displays showing data from the derelict ships. The council had predictably dismissed his findings, but they had at least granted him permission to continue his research, probably because they thought it was harmless. The door chimed, interrupting his thoughts. "Enter," he called out, not looking up from his work. Linda Wells, his longtime friend and ancient technology specialist, rushed in. Her usually neat gray hair was messy, and her face showed worry. "Marcus, you need to see this." She quickly connected her tablet to his main display. This just came in from the outer colonies. A hologram shifted to show a battle. Modern warships, sleek and powered by quantum drives, faced off against something Marcus had never seen before. The enemy vessels looked almost organic, moving like sea creatures through space. Their hulls seemed to be made of living tissue rather than metal. "What am I looking at?" Marcus asked, leaning forward. "They're calling it the Swarm," Linda replied, her voice tight. "They appeared 3 days ago at the edge of known space. These recordings are from the first contact team." She paused the video. It didn't end well. Marcus watched as the battle resumed. The modern ships fired their quantum phase cannons, but the energy weapons seemed to pass right through the Swarm vessels. Their biological hulls simply absorbed or redirected the attacks. Then the Swarm countered, launching what looked like spores into space. Where they touched the Alliance ships, the metal simply dissolved. "How many ships did we lose?" Marcus asked quietly. "All of them. The entire defense fleet in that sector." Linda pulled up another file. "But that's not why I'm here. Look at this." The display changed to show writing Marcus had found in one of the ancient ships. Linda had helped him translate it. "Ship's log," she read. "Day 312 of the Biowars. Standard weapons continue to prove ineffective against the high ships. Their organic technology adapts too quickly to energy-based attacks. But we're learning. Each failure teaches us something new." Marcus stood up so quickly his chair fell over. "You think this is the same enemy? After thousands of years? Or something very similar?" Linda nodded. "The descriptions match. And look at this." She brought up scans of the ancient fleet's weapon systems. These ships weren't built with standard energy weapons, Marcus. They're different. The design suggests they were specifically created to fight biological technology. Before Marcus could respond, the station's alert system blared to life. Commander Red's voice echoed through the speakers. "All research personnel report to the main hall immediately." This is not a drill. In the main hall, hundreds of researchers from dozens of species gathered. Commander Red stood on the central platform, his crystalline second-in-command blue beside him. The massive display behind them showed a map of Alliance space with a growing red zone at its edge. "The situation has escalated," Red announced, his translator making his chittering sound grave. "The Swarm has destroyed 3 more colony worlds. Our weapons are ineffective, and their bioships are adapting to every strategy we attempt." Marcus looked at Linda, then raised his hand. "Commander, request permission to speak." Red's antennae twitched in annoyance, but he nodded. "Dr. Reed, unless this is about the ancient ships, now is not the time." "It is exactly about the ancient ships," Marcus said firmly, stepping forward. "We found evidence that they were built to fight an enemy exactly like the Swarm. An enemy that used biological technology that could adapt to energy weapons." Murmurs filled the hall. Blue's crystalline form flickered with colors of disbelief. "Those primitive vessels, against this threat. Do not waste our time, Dr. Reed." "Those primitive vessels," Marcus countered, "were built by humans, my people. and they apparently won their war against a similar enemy thousands of years ago. He looked around the hall, meeting the eyes and optical sensors of his fellow researchers. Instead of dismissing them, maybe we should be learning from them. The silence that followed was broken only by another alert. 3 more colonies had gone dark. The swarm was getting closer, and time was running out. The ancient warship's emergency lights cast long shadows through its corridors as Marcus led his team deeper into its heart. After 3 days of arguing, Commander Red had finally given them permission to attempt reactivating one of the vessels. They had chosen the smallest ship in the fleet, which they now called Phoenix. Main engineering should be through here, Linda said, consulting her tablet. Behind her, Thomas Gray, their best pilot, helped carry the portable power units. 2 security drones floated silently behind them, their sensors scanning for any dangers. The engineering bay's doors were sealed shut. Marcus placed his hand on the manual release, took a deep breath, and pulled. The mechanism, despite its age, moved smoothly. The doors slid open with a soft hiss. "Impossible," Thomas whispered as they entered. The room was massive, filled with machinery that looked nothing like modern engine systems. Instead of the usual quantum cores, there were rows of what appeared to be massive copper coils and strange, crystalline structures. Linda immediately went to work, her scanners trying to make sense of the technology. "This isn't primitive at all," she said, excitement clear in her voice. "It's just different. Look at these patterns in the metal. The whole ship is full of them." Marcus examined the walls more closely. What they had first thought was damage or age was actually an intricate network of tiny channels running through the hull. Self-repairing systems, he realized. The ship can heal itself, like living metal, Thomas added, running his hand along one of the coils. To everyone's surprise, the metal seemed to warm under his touch. A soft hum began to fill the room. Linda rushed to her scanner. "That's impossible. The ship is responding to his biological signature. It's waking up." The emergency lights suddenly brightened, and new displays began to flicker to life around them. Ancient screens filled with scrolling text, all in Old English. The ship's systems were activating, one by one. "Look at this," Linda called out, pointing to one of the screens. "The ship's AI core. It's configured to respond specifically to human neural patterns. That's why it reacted to Thomas." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. They built these ships to be used only by humans. But why? Before anyone could answer, Thomas called out from the main control panel. "You need to see this. The ship's logs, they're still intact." He began reading. Final entry. "The bioships are retreating. Our new weapons work. The quantum harmonic fields disrupt their ability to adapt. We've driven them back to the void, but they'll return one day. We leave these ships as our legacy. When the enemy returns, humanity will need them again." The room fell silent except for the steady hum of the awakening ship. Then their comms crackled to life with Commander Red's voice. "Dr. Reed, the Council still refuses to take this seriously. They're calling your project a waste of resources." Marcus looked at his team, then at the ancient warship coming to life around them. "Ask the Council if they'd like to see a demonstration." Over the next few hours, more of the Phoenix's systems activated. The ship seemed to respond instinctively to human presence, its controls rearranging themselves to match their thought patterns. Thomas sat in what they assumed was the pilot's chair, and the displays immediately adjusted to his preferences. "It's like it knows what I'm thinking," he said in awe. "The controls, they're perfect. Not like our modern ships at all. This feels natural." Linda's scanners continued to reveal more surprises. The weapons systems are unlike anything we've seen. They don't just fire energy beams. They create fields that disrupt biological matter at a quantum level. Exactly what we need against the swarm. Marcus touched the ship's wall, feeling the subtle vibration of its awakening systems. "Our ancestors built these ships for this exact moment," he said quietly. They knew the enemy would return, and they made sure we'd be ready. A new alert flashed across the screens. The Phoenix's main reactor was coming online, power flowing through systems that had slept for thousands of years. The ancient warship was ready for battle once again, proving that sometimes the oldest solutions were the best ones. Now they just had to convince the Council before it was too late. The emergency alarms blared through the research station as Marcus ran to the command center. The swarm had just attacked Haven Colony, one of the largest settlements in the Outer Rim. Modern defense fleets were already engaging the enemy, but early reports weren't good. Commander Red's hologram flickered above the central display, showing the battle in real time. Dozens of sleek Alliance warships fired their weapons at the approaching bioships. Just like before, their energy weapons passed harmlessly through the organic hulls. 20 ships lost already. Blue reported, his crystalline form pulsing with worried colors. The colony's shields are failing. Marcus watched as another Alliance cruiser dissolved under the swarm's attacks. He stepped forward. "Commander, let us launch the Phoenix. We're ready for combat testing." That ancient vessel, Red's antennae twitched in frustration. Against these monsters, it would be suicide. "We don't have a choice," Marcus argued, pointing to the display. "Nothing else is working." The Phoenix's weapons were designed to fight exactly this kind of enemy. A new alert flashed across the screens. 3 more defense ships had been destroyed. Haven Colony's outer shields were down to 20%. Red's compound eyes studied Marcus for a long moment. "Very well," he finally chittered. "We have nothing left to lose. Launch your ship, Dr. Reed. Prove us wrong about human technology." Marcus was already running toward the docking bay before Red finished speaking. He found Thomas and Linda at the Phoenix's airlock, running final checks on their equipment. "Ship's systems are all green," Linda reported as they rushed inside. "The AI core is fully synchronized with Thomas's neural patterns." They reached the bridge, each taking their stations. The ancient displays lit up instantly, recognizing their presence. Thomas settled into the pilot's chair, and the ship's systems hummed to life around him. "This is Phoenix requesting launch clearance," Marcus called over the comm. "Clearance granted," Red replied. "Haven Colony reports shield failure in 10 minutes. Good hunting." The Phoenix lifted smoothly from the dock, its ancient engines purring like a well-tuned instrument. As they accelerated toward the jump point, Marcus couldn't help but notice how natural everything felt. The old ship moved like it was part of them, responding to Thomas's thoughts almost before he had them. They emerged from the jump point near Haven Colony, just as another Alliance ship exploded. The swarm vessels, looking like massive spaceborne jellyfish, were closing in on the colony's final defenses. "Weapons online," Linda called out. "Quantum harmonic fields at full power. We have targeting solutions on 3 swarm ships." "All ships, clear a path," Marcus ordered over the general channel. "We're going to test something." The Phoenix accelerated toward the nearest swarm vessel, its organic hull pulsed with alien light, preparing to launch its devastating spores. "Fire when ready," Marcus commanded. The ancient ship's weapons activated. Instead of the usual energy beams, rings of strange, shimmering force expanded outward. Where they touched the swarm ship's hull, the living tissue began to break down at a molecular level. "Direct hit," Linda shouted. "Their biological structure is destabilizing. The weapon works." The swarm ship writhed in space, its organic technology unable to adapt to the quantum disruption. Within moments, it began to break apart. The remaining swarm vessels immediately turned their attention to the Phoenix. "Here they come," Thomas warned, his hands dancing over the controls. The Phoenix moved with incredible agility, dodging streams of biological weapons while returning fire. 2 more swarm ships fell to the ancient weapons. The rest began to retreat, their confidence shaken by this unexpected resistance. Haven Colony was saved. The command channel erupted with shocked voices. Commander Red's translator could barely keep up with his excited chittering. "Impossible. That ship, those weapons, How? Marcus smiled as he watched the swarm flee. Not impossible, Commander. Just forgotten knowledge, waiting to be rediscovered. He turned to his crew. Send all combat data to the station. It's time to wake up the rest of the fleet. The Phoenix hung victorious in space, an ancient guardian proving that humanity's forgotten past might just be the key to saving their future. The research station's main laboratory buzzed with activity. After the Phoenix's success at Haven Colony, even the Council couldn't ignore the potential of the ancient fleet. Marcus stood at the central console, surrounded by holographic displays showing the ship's computer systems. Look at this coding structure, Linda said, pointing to a complex pattern of symbols. It's not just Old English. There are layers of meaning we're still uncovering. She highlighted a section of the ancient programming. Every system is connected. The weapons, the shields, even the hull, they all work together like parts of a living thing. Thomas entered the lab, carrying fresh data crystals from their latest test flight. The neural interface is getting stronger, he reported. It's like the ship learns from each pilot. The more we fly it, the better it responds. Marcus nodded, studying the new data. Our ancestors understood something we forgot. They didn't just build better weapons. They built ships that could think and grow. The lab's doors slid open as Commander Red entered, followed by 3 council members. Their previous dismissive attitude had been replaced by careful interest. The crystalline council member, High Elder Blue, approached the displays. Show us how these weapons work. Blue commanded, his form shifting with curious colors. Linda pulled up the weapon schematics. The quantum harmonic fields don't just attack the swarm ships, she explained. They disrupt the very pattern of their biological technology. It's like teaching their own cells to stop working together. Impossible, one of the council members muttered. Such precision would require learning. Marcus finished. The weapons learn from each encounter. That's why the swarm can't adapt to them. Our modern ships use brute force. These ships use understanding. He brought up footage from their latest skirmish with a swarm scout ship. The Phoenix's weapons had worked even better than during their first battle, adapting to the enemy's slight biological changes. Here's the really interesting part, Linda added, switching to a different display. We found these in the ship's memory banks. The screen filled with detailed records of the ancient biowars. Our ancestors fought the swarm, or something very like them, for years. Each defeat taught them something new. They built these ships to be teachers as much as warriors. Thomas stepped forward. The neural interface isn't just for control, he said. It shares knowledge. Every time I fly the Phoenix, I understand more about how it thinks, how it fights. It's teaching me everything it learned in the old wars. The council members whispered among themselves. Finally, High Elder Blue spoke. How many ships in the ancient fleet can be reactivated? Marcus checked his data. We've identified 217 vessels of various sizes. With what we've learned from the Phoenix, we could have them all operational within 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Red's antennae twitched in surprise. The modern shipyards take months to produce a single warship. Linda smiled. That's the beauty of it. These ships were designed to repair and reactivate each other. Once we wake them up, they'll help restore their sister ships. It's all part of their programming. A warning alarm cut through the discussion. The main screen switched to a tactical display showing a massive swarm fleet approaching Alliance space. It was larger than anything they'd seen before. 37 swarm high ships detected, the station's AI announced. Estimated arrival at current borders in 72 hours. The council members turned to Marcus. High Elder Blue's crystalline form pulsed with urgent colors. You have 1 week, Dr. Reed. Wake up your ancient fleet. Teach us everything you can about these ships. Marcus looked at his team, then back at the tactical display. We'll need every human pilot we can find. The neural interfaces only work with human brain patterns. You'll have them, Red promised. Every human pilot in the Alliance is being redirected to this station. As the council members left, Marcus turned back to the displays. The ancient code scrolled past, revealing more of its secrets. Their ancestors had left them more than just weapons. They'd left them wisdom, earned through hard battles and costly lessons. Now they just had to learn those lessons fast enough to survive. The vast space around the research station glowed with activity. 200 ancient warships, dormant for thousands of years, were waking up one by one. Marcus watched from the station's observation deck as each vessel's lights flickered to life, their hulls healing themselves as power flowed through long-dormant systems. Final ship coming online now, Linda reported from her console. The Phoenix's reactivation protocols worked perfectly. Each ship helped wake up the others, just like we hoped. Thomas entered the command center, followed by dozens of human pilots. They had arrived from every corner of Alliance space, drawn by the urgent call for those who could interface with the ancient vessels. Many still looked skeptical, but that would change once they linked with the ships. The swarm fleet is 12 hours out, Commander Red announced, his hologram flickering above the tactical display. All modern defense forces have been pulled back to support positions. The ancient fleet is our front line. Marcus turned to address the gathered pilots. Each of these ships has been waiting for you, he said, his voice firm. They were built by our ancestors to fight this exact enemy. They will teach you what you need to know. Trust them. The pilots dispersed to their assigned vessels, each accompanied by a technical team that had been hastily trained in the ancient systems. Marcus watched the steady stream of shuttles ferrying crews to their ships. Neural links establishing across the fleet, Linda called out. Her displays showed hundreds of connection points lighting up as each human pilot interfaced with their vessel. The ships are accepting their crews, power levels rising. The largest of the ancient ships, a massive vessel they had named Eternal Dawn, lit up like a small sun as its main reactors came fully online. It tall, nearly 2 kilometers long, rippled as self-repair systems cleared away millennia of space dust. This is Captain Sarah Roberts on Eternal Dawn, a voice called over the command channel. The ship, it's incredible. I can feel everything. It's showing me how to fight. Similar reports began flooding in from across the fleet. Each pilot reported the same experience. The ships were sharing their ancient knowledge, teaching their new crews everything they had learned in the biowars. Multiple swarm signatures detected. The sensor officer's voice cut through the chatter. They're coming out of hyperspace. The massive swarm fleet emerged from hyperspace like a nightmare made real. Dozens of massive organic ships, each surrounded by hundreds of smaller biovessels, filled the tactical display. Their living hulls pulsed with sickly light as they prepared for battle. All ships, battle formation Alpha, Marcus ordered. Remember your training. Remember what the ships have taught you. Trust their wisdom. The ancient fleet moved with perfect coordination, each vessel sliding into position as if they had trained together for years. The neural interfaces allowed them to react as a single unit, guided by their shared knowledge of fighting the swarm. Enemy fleet launching biotorpedoes, Linda reported. They're testing our defenses. Let them come, Thomas said from the Phoenix's bridge. These ships remember how to fight this enemy. Now so do we. The first wave of swarm weapons approached the ancient fleet. Instead of trying to dodge, the ships activated their quantum harmonic fields in a coordinated pattern. The biotorpedoes simply dissolved, their organic structures falling apart at a molecular level. All ships, weapons free, Marcus commanded. Show them what humanity remembered to build. The ancient fleet opened fire as one. Quantum harmonic pulses, far stronger than anything the Phoenix had generated alone, swept across space. Where they touched the swarm ships, the living metal began to break down. The enemy vessels tried to adapt, their biological technology attempting to evolve new defenses, but the ancient weapons were constantly changing, learning, adapting faster than the swarm could react. It's working, Linda shouted as the first swarm-high ship began to break apart. Their biological adaptation can't keep up with our quantum fields. Marcus watched as the battle unfolded, Humanity's forgotten legacy proving its worth against an enemy that had once threatened to destroy everything. The ancient fleet moved like a dance, each ship supporting the others, their combined knowledge and power greater than the sum of their parts. The swarm was about to learn why humans had survived the first bio-war. Some lessons, it seemed, were worth remembering. Space itself seemed to shimmer as the ancient fleet engaged the swarm. The massive battle had been raging for 6 hours, and the tide was finally turning. Marcus stood at the central command station, watching as centuries-old vessels proved their worth against an enemy that had terrified the modern alliance. Another hive ship down. Linda called out, her displays showing the massive organic vessel breaking apart under coordinated fire from 3 ancient warships. That's 15 destroyed, 12 remaining. The Eternal Dawn led a fresh attack run, its quantum harmonic weapons cutting through the swarm's biological defenses like they weren't even there. Captain Robert's voice came over the command channel, calm and focused. The ship's teaching me new attack patterns. The swarm keeps trying to adapt, but we're learning faster than they are. Commander Red's hologram watched in amazement as the ancient fleet moved with impossible coordination. In all my years, he chittered, I've never seen ships fight like this. They move like they share one mind. In a way they do, Marcus explained, pointing to the neural interface readings. The ships aren't just connected to their pilots, they're connected to each other. Every lesson learned is shared across the fleet instantly. High Elder Blue's crystalline form pulsed with excited colors as another swarm vessel fell. We were wrong, the council member admitted. We called these ships primitive because we didn't understand them. Your ancestors built something far beyond our comprehension. The battle continued to shift in their favor. The remaining swarm ships began to retreat, their biological technology unable to counter weapons that had been specifically designed to defeat them. The ancient fleet pressed their advantage, their coordinated attacks leaving the enemy no room to regroup. They're breaking formation, Thomas reported from the Phoenix. The hive ships are trying to jump to hyperspace. Not this time, Marcus commanded. All ships, execute containment pattern Delta. Don't let them escape to threaten another world. The ancient fleet moved as one, their quantum harmonic fields linking together to create a massive disruption web. The swarm ships found their retreat cut off, their organic jump drives unable to function within the quantum interference. This ends now, Marcus said firmly. All ships, final attack pattern. Show them why humanity survived the first bio-war. The ancient vessels aligned in a formation that looked chaotic at first glance, but was precisely calculated. Energy built up between them as their quantum harmonic weapons synchronized. When they fired, it wasn't individual beams, but a single massive pulse that swept across space like a cleansing wave. The remaining swarm ships didn't stand a chance. Their biological technology, for all its ability to adapt, couldn't overcome weapons that had been perfected through years of ancient warfare. One by one, the massive hive ships broke apart, their organic components reduced to base molecules. As the last enemy vessel disappeared from their sensors, a cheer went up across the command channel. Hundreds of voices celebrated victory. Human pilots and alien allies united in their amazement at what they had just witnessed. Commander Red's hologram turned to Marcus. The Council requests your presence, he said. They wish to formally apologize for dismissing these vessels as primitive. They also want to discuss further cooperation. Marcus smiled. Tell them I'll be there shortly. But first, we need to document everything we've learned. Humanity forgot these ships once. We won't make that mistake again. Linda was already compiling the battle data. The neural interfaces recorded everything, she reported. Every tactic, every adaptation, every lesson learned. We can use this to make our modern ships better, to combine the best of old and new technology. That's what our ancestors would have wanted. Thomas added, the Phoenix settling back into its dock. They built these ships to protect us, but also to teach us, to remind us that sometimes the old ways have value. High Elder Blue's form shifted to a deep, respectful purple. Today has taught us all a valuable lesson. Age does not determine worth, and wisdom can come from unexpected places. Marcus looked out at the ancient fleet, their hulls bearing fresh scars that were already beginning to heal. These ships had slept for thousands of years, waiting for the moment when they would be needed again. Their creators had been called primitive, their technology dismissed as obsolete. But in the end, they had saved humanity once again. Sometimes, it seemed, the best way to face the future was to remember the past.